You're in your early or mid 40s. The paycheck is bigger than it used to be. Your career feels stable. On paper, this should be the stage where money finally feels under control. Yet for many people, it doesn't. The checking account still runs tight. A car repair or school expense still creates tension. You're earning more, but the sense of ease never really shows up. Here's the part most people miss. Income isn't what determines whether money feels calm or stressful. A different structure quietly decides that. This isn't about hustling harder or chasing better investments. It's about understanding how everyday financial decisions, especially in your 40s, shape pressure or flexibility for decades. I'm Alex. Today we'll walk through how this decade quietly locks in the future, starting with why your 40s matter more than any raise, then breaking down how spending fixed costs and margin change how life actually feels. It starts with understanding why this decade doesn't decide how rich you look, but how much room you have to breathe later on. Why does this decade quietly decide how the rest of life feels? Your 40s don't decide how wealthy you look. They decide how constrained your future feels. That difference shows up quietly. It's the gap between waking up at 60 with choices or waking up with obligations already queued before breakfast. Earlier decades forgive mistakes. In your 20s and 30s, a bad year can be erased by time. Miss a few years of saving change careers late, overspend, and recover. The calendar gives you resets. In your 40s, those resets shrink. Not because it's too late, but because every decision now compounds forward with less room to dilute the impact. This is the decade where structure overtakes effort. Two people earning similar incomes can enter their 50s in radically different positions, not because one worked harder, but because one locked in commitments that silently controlled every future option. Mortgages, car payments, subscriptions, school costs once they stack up. They don't just drain money, they narrow flexibility. Here's the part that surprises people. The stress isn't caused by earning too little, it's caused by exposure. When most of your income is already promised to fixed costs, even small disruptions feel dangerous. A job change, a health issue, a market downturn, suddenly everything feels urgent. That's why this decade matters so much. The choices you normalize now don't scream for attention, they whisper. And by the time the noise gets loud, the direction is already set. A quiet pause before the numbers. Before talking about income and spending it helps to slow the frame for a moment, not to analyze or judge, just to notice how your instincts react when pressure eases even slightly. Imagine this. Starting next month, your income increases by about 15%. Nothing dramatic changes. Same job, same routine, same responsibilities. There's just a bit more left over at the end of the month than you're used to seeing. Most reactions fall into a few familiar directions. One is relief mixed with permission. You finally upgrade something that's felt tight for years. The payment fits, so it feels reasonable. Another response is optimization. You improve multiple areas at once. Better car, better home, smoother lifestyle. Everything feels more aligned. The third reaction is quieter. You let the extra income sit untouched for a while. No upgrades, no commitments, just space. Notice which one your mind reached for first. That instinct matters more than the math. Each path sends income in a different direction. One increases comfort, but raises future pressure. Another looks efficient, but often locks money in quickly. The quiet option doesn't feel exciting, but it preserves flexibility and reduces exposure. This isn't a test you pass or fail. It's a mirror. Because what usually tightens finances in the 40s isn't lack of income, it's how fast new income gets claimed. And that's exactly what the next section explores. Why earning more still leaves so many people financially tight. The strange thing about the 40s is that income often looks fine on paper. Salaries are higher than they were a decade ago. Careers are more stable. Yet the bank balance keeps drifting back towards zero. That contradiction is the first clue that income isn't the real lever. Data backs this up. A large share of households earning well into six figures still report living paycheck to paycheck. Not because money disappeared, but because spending quietly expanded to meet it. Bigger house, nicer cars, more small monthly payments that don't feel dangerous on their own. Together, they eat everything. This is where the trap tightens. Raises don't create relief, they create upgrades. 6 months after a pay bump, the stress level looks the same, just with better packaging. The bills are larger, but so is the paycheck. So it feels sustainable until something shifts. Here's the uncomfortable contrast. Someone earning less but keeping fixed costs low often feels calmer than someone earning more with heavy commitments. Same economy, same inflation, very different experience. The difference isn't discipline or intelligence. It's how much of each paycheck is already spoken for before the month even starts. That's the tease most people miss. The problem isn't that income stopped working, it's that income got assigned too quickly. And once it's assigned, it stops protecting you. How two reasonable choices lead to completely different futures. Picture two households with similar incomes, similar ages, similar careers. From the outside, both look successful. But under the surface, their months feel completely different. One household optimized for what looked responsible at the time. They stretched for the bigger house in a good school district, financed newer cars because the payments fit the budget, added memberships, upgrades, conveniences, nothing reckless. Each decision made sense on its own. The result is that 70 or 80% of income is already locked in before the month begins. When something unexpected shows up, the solution is usually a credit card or a quick transfer from savings. The other household made quieter choices. Slightly smaller house, cars kept longer, fewer fixed commitments, not because they couldn't afford more, but because they didn't need to. The difference shows up in margin. 20 or 30% of income isn't pre-assigned. That space changes everything. Here's the contrast most people don't expect. The first household often feels busy and stressed despite higher spending. The second feels calmer, even without upgrades. When an opportunity appears, a career move, time off, an investment, the second can say yes. The first hesitates even with a higher income. Both paths look reasonable in the moment. Only one quietly compounds flexibility. And once flexibility is gone, it's hard to buy back. What changes when time stops being on your side? In your 20s, time hides mistakes. In your 30s, it softens them. In your 40s, it starts keeping score. The same decision doesn't land the same way anymore. Earlier in life, you can miss a few years of saving and barely feel it. You can change careers, overspend, recover, and still have decades for compounding to do the heavy lifting. In your 40s, the window narrows. You still have time, but fewer resets. Every choice now moves forward with more weight. This is where the math becomes unforgiving. Markets may average strong long-term returns, but that growth only helps if money is actually invested. Many people assume future returns will fix today's gaps. But without participation, those averages are just numbers on paper. There's another quiet shift. Decisions that once felt temporary start becoming permanent. A mortgage taken on in your late 30s can easily follow you into your late 60s. A car payment rolled over again and again turns into a decade-long treadmill. These aren't dramatic mistakes. They're normal, reasonable moves that simply linger longer now. Here's the contrast worth sitting with. In your 40s, effort matters less than structure, not because you've lost momentum, but because time no longer erases friction. It amplifies it. Why the gap feels so large, no matter how much you save. Look at the numbers most people carry in their heads. Many believe they'll need well over $1 million to retire comfortably. Then look at reality. For people in their 40s, actual retirement balances are often a fraction of that. The gap feels enormous, almost discouraging, as if something already went wrong. But the gap isn't created by one bad decision. It's structural. Saving a little here and there doesn't overcome heavy monthly obligations. If most of your income is tied up before it ever hits your account, progress feels slow no matter how disciplined you are. This is where expectations break. People assume the solution is higher returns, better investments, or the next raise. But those only help if there's room for them to work. Without room, even good returns don't move the needle in a meaningful way. Here's the part that catches people off guard. Two households can save the same dollar amount each month and end up in very different places emotionally. One feels constantly behind, the other feels steady. The difference isn't the savings rate alone. It's what that savings is competing against. When overhead is high, savings feel fragile. When overhead is controlled, the same savings feel powerful. That's why the gap feels psychological as much as financial. It's not just how much you've saved, it's how much pressure that savings is under. Which monthly decisions lock you in for decades? Most long-term financial pressure doesn't come from dramatic mistakes. It comes from ordinary monthly decisions that quietly refuse to expire. Cars and housing are the biggest ones. Look at car payments. New vehicles now commonly come with monthly payments north of $700, and many households carry two. Stretch the loan to 6 or 7 years, and it feels manageable. But manageability hides the cost. Those payments don't just last years, they repeat. By the time one loan ends, another begins, and the treadmill keeps moving. Housing works the same way, just louder. When a large share of income goes to the mortgage, flexibility disappears. Spending 30, 40, even 50% of take home pay on housing doesn't feel dangerous at first. The house is nice, the neighborhood feels right, but that decision can follow you for decades, quietly redirecting money that could have been compounding. Here's the contrast that matters. A smaller house or older car doesn't just save money, it shortens the leash. Every dollar not locked into a fixed payment stays available for something else. Investing career moves, time off, or simply absorbing a bad month without panic. The hook most people miss is this. Fixed costs don't just cost money, they cost options. And once options are gone, getting them back takes far longer than giving them up. How financial pressure shrinks the way you think. Financial stress doesn't just change your bank balance, it changes how your brain works. When money feels tight, thinking narrows. Attention collapses onto whatever bill or problem is right in front of you. Behavioral research shows this clearly. When people feel scarcity, their mental bandwidth drops. Decisions become short-term by default. You stop asking what's best over the next 5 years and start asking, how do I get through this month? That shift happens even at high incomes. Someone earning a strong salary but spending almost all of it can experience the same mental strain as someone earning far less. You see it in everyday moments. The car repair shows up and suddenly everything else disappears. Career planning pauses. Long-term investing feels abstract. You're in firefighting mode, solving the immediate issue because it feels urgent and personal. Here's the uncomfortable contrast. The problem isn't intelligence or discipline, it's cognitive load. Constant obligations consume attention the same way background noise drains energy. Over time, that pressure pushes people toward quick fixes, rolling debt forward, delaying savings, avoiding decisions that feel complex. The quiet danger is this. When pressure becomes normal, short-term thinking feels rational. But it's not neutral. It slowly trades future leverage for present relief. And by the time you notice, the habit is already built. What actually changes once you have breathing room? The moment you build real margin, the change is subtle but immediate. Your phone buzzes, and your body doesn't tense. A surprise expense shows up, and it's inconvenient, not destabilizing. That shift alone alters how you move through your days. This isn't about earning interest on a savings account. It's about removing background stress. When you have 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside, your brain stops running constant risk calculations. Sleep improves. Decisions slow down. You're no longer reacting to every small disruption as if it's a crisis. The numbers explain why this matters. A large portion of adults don't have enough saved to cover even a few months of basic expenses. That means almost half of households are operating with no shock absorber. In that environment, even minor setbacks feel dangerous. Here's the contrast worth noticing. 2 people can earn the same income. One has margin and feels steady. The other has none and feels anxious. The difference isn't optimism, it's capacity. Once breathing room exists, something else changes. You start thinking ahead again. Career moves become strategic instead of desperate. Investments stop feeling like gambles. Even family time feels lighter because money isn't constantly intruding. The tease most people miss is this. Margin doesn't just protect you from bad outcomes. It quietly makes better ones visible. Why feeling stuck at work and with money is the same problem. When finances feel tight, careers tend to stall, not because ability disappears, but because leverage does. Without savings, every paycheck becomes non-negotiable. You take the first offer. You tolerate the situation. You delay the move that could actually change things. Watch how this plays out in real life. A company shifts direction. A manager makes a request that crosses a line. A new role appears that pays less upfront, but offers long-term growth. If you're living month to month, the answer is already decided. Stability beats possibility, even when stability feels wrong. Now compare that to someone with 6 months of expenses set aside and lower fixed costs. The same situations feel different. They can pause, ask questions, negotiate, walk away if needed, not because they're reckless, but because they're buffered. This is where the loop forms. Financial margin creates confidence. Confidence leads to better career decisions. Better decisions improve income and stability, which reinforces margin. The opposite loop is just as real. Pressure creates fear. Fear drives defensive choices. Defensive choices lock in pressure. Here's the quiet insight. Career dissatisfaction and financial stress usually show up together because they're built on the same foundation. When money removes your ability to say no, Work removes your ability to move forward. Which normal choices quietly undo years of progress? Most financial damage in your 40s doesn't come from reckless behavior. It comes from doing what feels normal. The first trap is lifestyle creep. A raise arrives, and within months, the money is gone. A slightly better house, a nicer car, a few more subscriptions. Stress stays the same, just wrapped in better branding. The second trap is treating savings milestones as permission to spend. You finally build a decent balance, then reward yourself by draining it. The emergency fund turns into a vacation fund. The retirement account becomes justification for a big purchase. Each time compounding quietly resets and progress stalls without obvious warning signs. Housing upgrades are the heaviest trap. Using equity to move up feels responsible, but higher payments follow you for decades. What looks like success locks in pressure. Car decisions work the same way. Longer loans and higher payments make expensive vehicles feel affordable, but they stretch obligations far into the future. Here's the contrast most people miss. None of these choices are mistakes in isolation. They're socially reinforced. Banks approve them. Friends celebrate them. The economy encourages them. But normal isn't neutral. In your 40s, normal choices carry outsized weight. They don't explode. They erode. And by the time the erosion becomes visible, years have already passed. Key takeaways. What separates calm from constant pressure isn't income intelligence or discipline. It's structure. The 40s quietly reveal this because time stops absorbing friction for you. Fixed costs become louder. Margin becomes rarer. And the absence of buffer turns normal life events into stress tests. The pattern running underneath everything is exposure. When most of your income is already committed, your mind narrows, your options shrink, and decisions become defensive. When margin exists, the opposite happens. Thinking expands. Career moves improve. Risk becomes calculated instead of frightening. The future doesn't feel easy, but it feels negotiable. This isn't about deprivation or chasing some perfect number. It's about preserving flexibility long enough for compounding to work in your favor, financially and psychologically. The real asset built in this decade isn't wealth you can show. It's leverage you can feel. If this way of looking at money resonates, staying with this series will deepen that lens over time.